My name is Emerson Voss. I'm a high-voltage lineman who survived the first 48 hours of the zombie outbreak when Boston fell. I watched a routine power outage at the hospital turn into Patient Zero's hunting ground. Now, I use my electrical skills to keep survivors alive while the infected close in. This is how civilization collapsed in just 2 days. Before we start the video, let us know what country you are tuning in from in the comment section below. Perhaps we will make a story there. Let's begin. My name's Emerson Voss, but most people just call me Riggs. I've been working as a high-voltage lineman with Northeast Power Grid for just over 10 years now. It's not a job most people think about until their lights go out, but I've always loved it. There's something about understanding the invisible flow of electricity through the veins of our cities that gives you a different perspective on how fragile everything really is. The morning it all started was completely normal. Tuesday, October 18th, 2022. I remember the date because I'd been joking with my coworker Pete about how we had exactly 1 week until my birthday. I woke up at 5:30, same as always, made my coffee in the same steel thermos I've had since I started this job, checked my gear bag twice, like I always do. Some habits keep you alive in my line of work. Morning briefing was standard. We had routine maintenance scheduled on the northeastern grid, some pole replacements in the suburbs, and a service call about voltage fluctuations near that research facility outside Boston. The Harrington Institute, they called it. Some kind of biomedical research center. Normally corporate facilities like that handled their own power issues, but they've been having problems for weeks and finally reached out to us. Pete and I drove out there in our utility truck. It was a perfect fall morning, leaves just starting to change, temperature in the low 60s. The kind of day that makes you glad to work outdoors. When we arrived at the facility, something felt off. There was security everywhere, more military presence than I'd ever seen at a research center. Men in unmarked black SUVs, barriers around the perimeter. I remember thinking it was strange for a medical research place to have that kind of protection. We were escorted through 3 security checkpoints just to reach the main transformer station. While I was checking the power load readings, I noticed something odd. The fluctuations weren't random like you'd see with faulty equipment. They were showing a pattern, almost like pulses. Every 6 minutes, a massive draw on power, then nothing. Whatever they were doing in there required enormous amounts of electricity at precise intervals. While Pete was running diagnostics on the backup generator, I overheard 2 men in lab coats talking around the corner. I only caught fragments, but what I heard made me uneasy. Containment protocols failed twice yesterday, one said. The subjects are showing increased aggression, replied the other. We need approval to terminate the trial before someone gets hurt. I didn't think much of it at the time. Research facilities always had their own jargon. Maybe they were testing new medication on lab rats or something. If only I paid more attention. As we were finishing up, a security guard approached us. Tall guy, military posture, eyes constantly scanning. He asked if we'd noticed anything unusual about the power grid in the area. I mentioned the regular pulsing pattern, and he exchanged looks with another guard. They thanked us abruptly and escorted us out much faster than they'd let us in. On the drive back, Pete told me his wife Linda had been acting strange lately. She was a nurse at Boston Memorial Hospital. Apparently, they'd been getting an unusual number of patients with high fevers and confusion. The hospital had even started setting up isolation wards. Again, I didn't connect the dots. We'd had flu outbreaks before. Back at the main office, I filed an incident report about the power surges. My supervisor Ryan looked concerned when I mentioned the Harrington Institute. He made a call I couldn't hear, then came back and told me to keep the findings between us for now. That should have been my second warning. Around 3 in the afternoon, the call came in. Boston Memorial Hospital was experiencing critical power issues. Their backup generators were failing, and with hundreds of patients on life support, they needed help immediately. Ryan dispatched me since I was the most experienced lineman available. All hands on deck for this one, Riggs, he said. They sound desperate. The drive to the hospital should have taken 20 minutes. It took me nearly 45. The streets were clogged with ambulances and police cars. I remember thinking it must be a major accident somewhere, maybe a pileup on the highway. I had no idea the accident was already inside the hospital walls. When I finally pulled into the hospital parking lot, I knew something was seriously wrong. Emergency vehicles everywhere. Security guards at every entrance. People rushing in and out, some in hazmat suits. If I'd known what was happening inside those walls, I would have driven in the opposite direction. But sometimes being oblivious is the only thing that gets you through the door. I grabbed my tool bag and approached the main entrance. A guard stopped me until I showed my utility company ID and explained I was there for the power issues. He spoke into his radio, got confirmation, and waved me through with a grim expression. Electrical rooms in the basement, south wing, he said. Don't wander around. The inside of the hospital was barely controlled chaos. Medical staff running in every direction. Patients on gurneys lined the hallways. Armed security guards outside certain rooms. I made my way to the basement, following the signs to the electrical room. The hospital's chief engineer met me there, a nervous man named Howard who kept wiping sweat from his forehead. Thank God you're here, he said. We've had 3 power failures in the last hour. The backup generators keep overloading. I started checking the systems. Technically, everything looked functional, but the load was massive, way beyond normal hospital operations. What's drawing all this power? I asked Howard. He hesitated before answering. New quarantine systems in the East Wing, special air filtration, security doors, monitoring equipment. They brought it all in yesterday. As I worked, I could hear the hospital PA system constantly announcing code alerts. Code blue for cardiac arrests. Code gray for combative patients. It seemed like a new emergency every few minutes. I needed to check the junction boxes on each floor to isolate the problem. Howard gave me his access card and looked relieved to stay in the basement. Can't say I blame him now. The second floor was relatively normal. Nurses and doctors moving with purpose, patients in rooms. But when I reached the 3rd floor, the north wing, things changed. Workers were installing heavy plastic barriers. Signs warning of isolation protocols. Medical staff in full protective gear. I approached one of the nurses to ask about the electrical outlets I needed to check. Make it quick, she snapped, then lowered her voice. We need to seal this section within the hour. What's going on? I asked. New virus, she whispered. High fever, rapid onset. Patients become extremely aggressive. She glanced around nervously. They're biting staff, if you can believe it. 3 doctors already infected. That's when I first heard the term, the biters, from another nurse rushing past. I thought they meant delirious patients, maybe hallucinating from the fever. I was wrong. So wrong. I managed to check most of the junction boxes and was heading back to the basement when it happened. The lights flickered once, twice, and then everything went dark. Emergency lights kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. The hospital PA system announced a code black, complete lockdown. People started screaming somewhere down the hall. I heard crashes, the sound of equipment being knocked over. I ran toward the electrical room, taking a shortcut through the cafeteria. That's where I saw it happen. My first encounter. A patient in a hospital gown was on top of a doctor. At first, I thought the patient was having a seizure, and the doctor was trying to help. Then I saw the blood. The patient was biting into the doctor's neck, tearing at flesh. 2 security guards rushed in, trying to pull the patient off. But the patient was unnaturally strong, thrashing and growling like an animal. One guard managed to restrain the patient, while the other helped the injured doctor. But it was too late. The doctor's eyes were already glazing over, his body beginning to twitch and convulse. Within minutes, he was up again, moving with the same jerky motions as the first patient, lunging at anyone nearby. I backed out of the cafeteria as more security rushed in. The PA system was announcing evacuation procedures, but the hospital doors had automatically sealed due to the emergency protocols. We were trapped inside. I tried calling dispatch, but the cell networks were already overloaded. People trying to call loved ones, call for help. No one could get through. That's when I realized my utility company radio might still work. I managed to reach Ryan, but the connection was poor. Emergency at the hospital, I told him. Some kind of outbreak. People attacking each other. We're locked down. His response was broken, but I made out a few phrases, not just there, and citywide situation, and stay put until the line went dead. I was on my own. I remembered my access card to the maintenance areas. If I could reach the service tunnels that ran under the hospital, I might find a way out. I started making my way through the back corridors, using my flashlight to navigate. That's when I ran into Sarah, a nurse hiding in a supply closet. She was young, probably just out of nursing school, and terrified. They're everywhere, she whispered. The infected. It's spreading so fast. What exactly is happening? I asked her. It's some kind of fever, she explained. It starts with high temperature, confusion, then extreme aggression. It spreads through bites. The saliva carries the pathogen directly into the bloodstream. She swallowed hard. And it works fast. 20 minutes from bite to transformation. We'd never seen anything like it. Through a window, we could see military vehicles arriving outside, setting up a perimeter around the hospital. They'll contain it, Sarah said hopefully. They'll have a cure soon. But I've worked enough disaster zones to know when containment has already failed. The panicked radio chatter, the desperate measures, the military presence. This wasn't a local problem anymore. I told Sarah about the maintenance tunnels. She knew a shortcut through the radiology department that would get us there faster. As we made our way through the darkened corridors, we heard the sounds of fighting, of people running, of doors being barricaded. We passed by a nurse's station where a small television was still working on emergency power. The news was showing scenes from downtown Boston. Streets filled with panicked people, police barricades, fires starting in some buildings. This was spreading beyond the hospital. Fast. Sarah and I reached the access point to the maintenance tunnels. I used Howard's card to open the heavy metal door. The tunnels were dark, lit only by sparse emergency lights. They smelled of damp concrete and stale air. But they were quiet. No screams, no running feet, no growls of the infected. These tunnels connect to the city's underground service network, I explained to Sarah. If we follow them east, we should be able to surface a few blocks away from the hospital. She nodded, eyes wide with fear but determined. Then what? I didn't have an answer. My apartment was across the city. The streets were chaos, and from what I glimpsed on the news, this wasn't a situation that would be resolved quickly. One step at a time, I told her. First, we get out of here. Then we find somewhere safe to wait this out. We made our way through the tunnels, using my flashlight to guide us. I kept track of our position by noting the utility markers on the walls. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, we reached a maintenance hatch that should lead to a street about 4 blocks east of the hospital. Ready? I asked Sarah. She took a deep breath and nodded, as I'll ever be. I climbed the metal ladder and pushed against the heavy hatch. It opened with a groan of rusty hinges. We emerged into an alley between 2 office buildings. The street beyond was nothing like the Boston I knew. Cars abandoned in the middle of the road, some with doors still open. Vapor and trash blowing in the wind, and people, some running with purpose, others wandering aimlessly with that now familiar jerky movement. In the distance, sirens wailed. Smoke rose from several buildings to the north. My God, Sarah whispered, it's everywhere. The city was falling, and we were right in the middle of it. Sarah and I crouched in the alley, trying to process the scene before us. The streaks that had been normal just hours ago were now something out of a nightmare. I checked my watch, just past 7 in the evening. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? We need to find somewhere safe, I told Sarah. Somewhere elevated with limited access points. That's when I remembered the power substation on Westfield Street, about 6 blocks away. It was surrounded by a security fence, had a sturdy roof access, and most importantly, I had keys to get inside. If we could reach it, we might have a secure place to wait things out. I tried my radio again, hoping to reach someone from Northeast Power Grid. Through the static, I caught fragments of emergency broadcasts. Citywide evacuation and military checkpoints at major highways and shelter in place if unable to reach evacuation centers. They're setting up evacuation points, I told Sarah. But we need to be careful getting there. Those infected people are everywhere. We moved cautiously from the alley, staying close to buildings, avoiding open streets. I kept my heavy-duty lineman's gloves on. They protected me from 13,000 volts, so they should hold up against a bite. As we turned onto Marlborough Street, we saw our first military checkpoint about 3 blocks ahead. National Guard troops in full gear were screening people trying to pass through. But the line was hundreds deep, and I noticed they were checking everyone for fever. They're screening for symptoms, Sarah whispered, but they don't understand. By the time someone shows fever, they've already been infected for hours. They could already be contagious. She was right. As we watched, a man in line suddenly collapsed. Within moments, he was convulsing, then lurching to his feet, attacking those around him. Panic erupted. The crowd scattered. The soldiers opened fire. We need another route, I said, pulling Sarah back into a side street. We circled wide, avoiding main streets. Twice we had to hide as groups of infected passed by. They moved differently from normal people, jerky, uncoordinated, but with terrifying purpose. Their eyes were vacant, bloodshot. Some still wore hospital gowns or business attire, remnants of who they'd been just hours before. At one intersection, we saw a city bus crashed into a storefront. The driver was still in his seat, but changed, growling and straining against his seatbelt. Passengers who hadn't escaped lay in the aisle, twitching as the infection took hold. We're not going to make it to an evacuation center, Sarah said, her medical training giving her a clear-eyed view of our situation. The infection is spreading too fast. We need somewhere to hole up. The substation, I insisted. It's built to keep people out. We just need to get there. We continued our careful progress through back alleys and serviceways. My knowledge of the city's infrastructure was proving invaluable. Most people never notice the maintenance accesses, service corridors, and utility routes that form a secondary network through urban areas. But for those of us who work the grid, they're like a parallel city. As dusk deepened into night, the city's power grid began failing in sections. To the north, entire neighborhoods went dark. Emergency generators kicked in at hospitals and government buildings, their lights standing out against the growing blackness. Why is the power failing? Sarah asked as we paused to catch our breath in a delivery entrance. The grid is automated to a point, but it needs human operators, I explained. If the operators at the central stations are compromised, or if critical maintenance isn't performed, sections will start failing from overload or safety protocols. I didn't tell her what really worried me. Nuclear plants had safety shutdown procedures, but if those weren't properly managed, we could be looking at problems that would make this outbreak seem minor. We were getting close to the substation when we heard screams ahead. A small group of survivors was being pursued by infected. They were running toward us, unknowingly leading the danger right to us. Quick an ear, I said, opening a utility access door that led to a small equipment room for traffic signals. We squeezed inside, closing the door just as the group ran past, followed seconds later by their pursuers. We waited in tense silence for several minutes before I dared to open the door again. The street was empty now, but in the distance, we could hear more screams, occasional gunfire. 2 more blocks, I told Sarah. We can make it. We moved quickly now, keeping to shadows. The substation loomed ahead, its perimeter fence a welcome sight. I used my access key on the personnel gate, and we slipped inside, locking it behind us. The substation was empty, as expected. These facilities were designed to run with minimal human oversight. The main building was small but solid, cinder block construction with few windows, all securely barred. Once inside, I locked and barricaded the door. The control room had emergency lighting, monitoring systems, and most importantly, a radio set that could reach the main power centers. We made it, Sarah said, her voice breaking with relief as she sank into a chair. I tried the radio immediately, hoping to reach Ryan or anyone from Northeast Power. The static was punctuated by occasional transmissions, but nothing directed to us. I set it to scan, hoping to pick up official emergency broadcasts. The substation's monitors showed the power grid status. Large sections of Boston were already dark. Cambridge was running on partial power. The screens showed automated alerts from numerous distribution points, failures, overloads, fires. This is bad, I muttered, more to myself than to Sarah. The system is designed to handle localized failures, but not citywide disruption. I adjusted some controls, trying to stabilize the power flow to critical infrastructure that was still online. Hospitals, police stations, government buildings, they needed priority. I couldn't fix the whole grid from here, but I could help prevent cascading failures in our immediate area. As I worked, the radio scanner stopped on an emergency broadcast. This is an emergency alert from the Massachusetts State Emergency Management Agency. A highly contagious pathogen has been reported in multiple locations. Citizens are advised to shelter in place if evacuation is not possible. Avoid contact with infected individuals. Symptoms include high fever, disorientation, and aggressive behavior. Infection spreads through direct contact with bodily fluids. Military and emergency services are establishing safe zones. Stand by for locations of emergency shelters. The broadcast repeated, then cut to a different voice. Someone from the CDC. The contagion appears to affect the frontal lobe and limbic system, resulting in loss of higher reasoning and extreme aggression. The incubation period is extremely short, with full symptoms developing within 30 minutes of exposure. There is currently no known cure or vaccine. Avoid all contact with infected individuals. Barricade all entries to your shelter. This is not a drill. Sarah and I exchanged grim looks. What they were describing wasn't just a local hospital outbreak. This was potentially nationwide. Could it really spread that far, that fast? I asked her. With air travel? Absolutely, she said. If infected people boarded planes before showing symptoms, they could have reached any major city before anyone knew what was happening. The radio scanner continued cycling through frequencies. We caught fragments of military communications, emergency services, civilian broadcasts. The picture they painted was bleak. New York was reporting similar outbreaks. Chicago, Los Angeles. This wasn't just happening in Boston. Night had fully fallen now. Through the substation's high windows, we could see fires burning across the city. Occasional explosions lit up the sky as gas lines ruptured or vehicles caught fire. The sounds of chaos, screams, gunfire, car alarms, formed a constant background noise. "You should try to rest," I told Sarah. "I'll keep monitoring the radio." She nodded, exhaustion evident in her face. She curled up on a small cot in the corner, emergency equipment for workers who needed to pull overnight shifts. I continued checking the grid status, making small adjustments where I could. But the truth was, there wasn't much I could do from here. The system was failing faster than anyone could fix it remotely. Around midnight, a new sound caught my attention. Scratching at the perimeter fence, I peered through the window and felt my blood run cold. Infected were gathering outside, drawn perhaps by the light or the faint electronic hum of the equipment. There weren't many yet, 5 or 6, but they were alert, aware of our presence. I dimmed the interior lights, hoping to make us less noticeable. But I feared it was too late. They found us. For the next few hours, I alternated between monitoring the radio, watching our unwanted visitors, and trying to rest. The infected outside grew in number. By 3 a.m, there were at least 20, all prowling the fence line, occasionally testing the gate, always watching the building. Sarah woke around dawn, looking more rested but still frightened. I showed her our situation. "They're hunting," she said quietly. "The virus doesn't just make them aggressive, it makes them predatory." "Will they lose interest if we stay quiet?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't think so. From what we saw at the hospital, they're persistent. And they seem to communicate somehow, calling others when they find potential victims." This was worse than I thought. We had food and water for maybe 2 days, emergency supplies kept at the substation. But if we couldn't leave, we'd eventually be trapped. I turned my attention back to the radio, scanning for any updated information. Around 6 a.m, we picked up a military frequency. "All units be advised. Operation Firebreak commencing at 0800. Urban centers designated red zones will be subject to tactical containment measures. Evacuate all friendlies from target areas immediately." Repeat. Operation Firebreak commencing at 0800. "What does that mean?" Sarah asked, fear evident in her voice. "Nothing good," I replied. "Tactical containment usually means they've given up on saving everyone. They're going to focus on containing the spread, whatever it takes." I looked at my watch. We had less than 2 hours. "We need to move," I decided. "This substation is too close to downtown. If they're planning some kind of containment action, we need to be outside whatever perimeter they're establishing." But with infected surrounding us, leaving wouldn't be simple. I needed a diversion. That's when I remembered the substation's fail-safe systems. In case of critical overload, we could trigger a controlled shutdown that would cause a loud alarm and visible electrical arc discharge. Harmless but impressive. It might draw the infected away from the gate long enough for us to slip out. "I'm going to create a diversion," I explained to Sarah. "When I give the signal, we run for the east gate. There's another utility access tunnel entrance 2 blocks from here. If we can reach it, we can move through the maintenance network again." She nodded, gathering our meager supplies into a bag while I programmed the diversion. I set it for a 3-minute delay, enough time for us to get into position. "Ready?" I asked. "Ready," she confirmed, though fear was etched across her face. I activated the sequence, and we moved to the door. 3 minutes later, alarms blared and a shower of sparks erupted from equipment on the western side of the yard. As I'd hoped, the infected were immediately drawn to the noise and light, shambling away from our escape route. "Now," I whispered, and we slipped out the door, staying low and moving quickly along the fence line to the east gate. I locked it, and we slipped through, immediately taking cover behind a parked delivery truck. The distraction worked. We made it 2 blocks before hearing the pursuing growls behind us. The infected had realized their prey was escaping and were now in pursuit, their unnerving shrieks alerting others in the area. "The access tunnel is just ahead," I urged as we ran. We rounded the corner, and I saw the maintenance hatch, a heavy metal cover in the sidewalk. I pulled out my access tool and quickly opened it, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. "Go," I told Sarah, and she climbed down without hesitation. I followed, pulling the hatch closed above us, just as the first infected reached our position. Their frustrated growls filtered down to us as we descended into the relative safety of the maintenance tunnel. My flashlight revealed a concrete passageway stretching in both directions. Unlike the hospital tunnels, these were wider, designed for moving equipment. They connected various utilities, electrical, water, telecommunications, in a network beneath the city streets. "Which way?" Sarah asked. I consulted my mental map of the infrastructure. "East," I decided, "away from downtown." The military will focus containment efforts on population centers first. We moved quickly through the tunnels, my flashlight leading the way. I checked junction markings to keep our bearings. After about 20 minutes, we heard a deep rumbling boom from above, then another. The ground shook slightly. "They've started," I said grimly. "Operation Firebreak." We paused at a junction where a ladder led up to a street-level access. I climbed partway up and carefully lifted the cover just enough to peer out. What I saw confirmed my fears. Military helicopters circled in the distance. Smoke rose from multiple locations downtown. And in the harbor, naval vessels had positioned themselves, their weapons pointed toward the city. They were bombing parts of Boston, trying to create fire breaks to contain the infection. Just as they might contain a wildfire by removing fuel in its path, they were trying to create dead zones where the infection couldn't spread. I dropped back down and explained what I'd seen to Sarah. Her face paled. "How far do we need to go to be safe?" she asked. "I'm not sure they're as safe anymore," I admitted. "But we need to get beyond whatever perimeter they're establishing." We continued east through the tunnels, eventually emerging in a residential neighborhood about 4 miles from downtown. The streets here were quieter, though signs of hasty evacuation were everywhere. Abandoned cars, dropped belongings, doors left open. We took shelter in a small convenience store, clearing it carefully before barricading the entrance. Through the windows, we could see the city skyline in the distance, now partly obscured by smoke. Occasional flashes and booms indicated continuing military action. The store's small television was still working, running on a backup generator. We tuned to a news channel, hoping for information. The reporter was broadcasting from what appeared to be a military base. "The government has declared a state of national emergency as the contagion continues to spread across major urban centers. Military forces have established quarantine zones and are implementing containment protocols. Citizens are advised to evacuate to designated safe zones if possible or shelter in place away from population centers." The screen showed a map with red zones marked across the country: Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, all major cities. Officials are calling this a novel pathogen of unprecedented virulence. The CDC reports that the infection appears to affect neural functions, causing extreme aggression and loss of cognitive control. There is currently no known treatment. Sarah sat heavily in a chair. "It's everywhere," she whispered. I found the store's radio and began scanning frequencies again, searching for local information. Through military chatter, I learned that they had established a safe zone at Hanscom Air Force Base, about 15 miles west of Boston. They were evacuating uninfected civilians there, screening them carefully before admission. "We could try to reach the Air Force Base," I suggested to Sarah. She considered it, then shook her head. "The roads will be chaos, and they're bombing between here and there. We'd be walking into a war zone." She was right. Our best chance was to find somewhere secure, stock up on supplies, and wait for the military to establish control. If that was even possible. As evening approached, we did a quick inventory of the store's supplies. Food, water, first aid items, enough to last several days if we were careful. We took turns watching the street while the other rested. The power remained on in this neighborhood, though flickering occasionally. I wondered how long that would last. Without maintenance, the grid would continue to degrade, and if the power plants initiated emergency shutdowns, everything would go dark. Through the store windows, we could see movement on the streets, sometimes survivors like us, moving cautiously, avoiding contact. Sometimes infected, hunting alone or in small groups. Their numbers seem to be increasing. "We can't stay here long term," I told Sarah as night fell again. "This location is too exposed, too easy to break into. We need somewhere more secure." "Where?" she asked, the exhaustion evident in her voice. I thought about the city's infrastructure, the places most people never considered. "There's an electrical plant about 2 miles east of here," I said. "Old facility, but solid construction. Limited access points, security fencing. And I know how to get the systems running, provide power even if the main grid fails." "Can we reach it safely?" "Through the tunnels, yes. There's an access point about a block from here." We decided to rest for the night and move at first light. We took turns on watch, 4 hours each. During my shift, I saw military vehicles pass by twice, but they didn't stop. They were establishing a perimeter, not searching for survivors. When morning came, the view outside had changed. There were more infected on the streets, moving with that distinctive jerky gait. They seemed to be organizing somehow, clustering together rather than wandering individually. "They're forming packs," Sarah observed, "like wolves." As we gathered supplies and prepared to leave, a thought struck me that turned my blood cold. Those power fluctuations at the Harrington Institute hadn't been random. They weren't just equipment malfunctions. Someone had been trying to send a warning through the power grid itself. Pulses that any lineman might notice and report. A desperate attempt to alert the outside world before containment failed completely. If only I'd understood sooner. If only I'd paid more attention. But it was too late for regrets now. Our focus had to be on survival. Ready? I asked Sarah, shouldering our bag of supplies. She nodded, her face set with determination, despite the fear I knew she felt. Then let's move. Stay close and stay quiet. We slipped out the back door of the store, heading for the maintenance access that would take us, hopefully, to safety. Day 2 of the outbreak was beginning, and I had a feeling it would be even worse than the first. We slipped into the maintenance tunnel without incident, pulling the access cover closed behind us. The sound of the infected above immediately muffled, replaced by the dripping of water and the distant hum of still-functioning equipment. I clicked on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness of the concrete passage. We need to head east, I told Sarah, orienting myself using the junction markings on the wall. Stay close. These tunnels were different from the hospital service corridors, wider, designed for equipment transport. They connected the various utilities of the city, electrical, water, gas, telecommunications, in a hidden network beneath the streets. Most citizens had no idea how extensive these systems were. As a lineman, I'd spent years learning this underground maze. Now that knowledge might save our lives. We moved as quietly as possible, our footsteps echoing slightly despite our caution. Every sound felt magnified in the confined space. I checked my watch, just past 7 in the morning. We'd been surviving for almost 24 hours since the outbreak began at the hospital. How far to this electrical plant? Sarah whispered. About 2 miles through these tunnels, I replied. There's a direct access point that should bring us up inside the facility's perimeter. The tunnels were mercifully empty. Most people wouldn't think to use them, and the infected seemed to prefer hunting in the open. Still, we moved cautiously, stopping to listen at each junction. As we walked, I explained more about our destination. It's an older facility, built in the 70s. Mainly serves as a distribution hub now, but it has independent generator capabilities. Thick concrete walls, security fencing, limited entry points. It was designed to withstand everything from weather to civil unrest. You think we can secure it? Sarah asked. If we can reach it, yes. And I can get at least partial power running, independent of the main grid. That means lights, heat, maybe even communications if the equipment is still functional. We continued east, following the maintenance markers. After about an hour, we heard a sound that stopped us cold, a metallic clang from somewhere ahead, followed by shuffling footsteps. I immediately switched off my flashlight, plunging us into darkness. We pressed ourselves against the wall, barely breathing. The sounds grew closer. The irregular footsteps I now recognized as belonging to the infected. They were in the tunnels. I felt Sarah tense beside me. The infected were approaching our position, moving slowly but directly. In the pitch blackness, they'd have to pass within inches of us. I squeezed Sarah's arm, a silent signal to remain absolutely still. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by that unsettling low growl they made when hunting. Then came the smell, a sickly sweet scent of sweat, and something else, something wrong. A beam of light wavered along the tunnel wall. The infected had a flashlight. That meant they weren't mindless. They were using tools. The light swung wildly, illuminating sections of tunnel as they approached. We pressed ourselves into a small alcove, housing electrical junction boxes. The light passed over us once, twice, but the infected continued forward without stopping, 3 of them moving as a group. They turned at the next junction, their light gradually fading, the sounds diminishing. We waited 5 full minutes before I dared to turn my flashlight back on, keeping it pointed at the ground to minimize the glow. They're learning, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Using tools, moving in groups. The virus isn't just making them aggressive. It's creating some kind of high behavior. That makes them more dangerous, I agreed. We needed even more careful. We altered our route, taking a longer path to avoid following the infected. The tunnels branched frequently, but it kept us moving east, checking junction markers to maintain our orientation. After another hour, we reached a massive concrete wall with a heavy steel door, the foundation of the electrical plant. My access key worked, the lock releasing with a click that sounded impossibly loud in the quiet tunnel. This leads into the plant's basement level, I explained to Sarah. Once inside, we need to clear the building before we do anything else. We entered cautiously, my flashlight revealing a large maintenance room filled with equipment. It was silent except for the faint hum of emergency systems on backup power. We checked each corner, each possible hiding place, before proceeding to the stairs. The plant had 3 levels: basement for maintenance, ground floor for primary systems, and an upper level with offices and the control room. We cleared each methodically, room by room. The facility appeared abandoned, evacuated in haste when the outbreak began. Personal items remained at workstations, half-empty coffee cups, jackets still hung on hooks. In the break room, we found something useful, a television still functioning on emergency power. We turned it on, keeping the volume low, and found a news broadcast in progress. The military has established quarantine zones around major urban centers. Citizens are advised to proceed to designated evacuation points if safe to do so. Those unable to evacuate should shelter in secure locations away from population centers. The CDC confirms the pathogen spreads through bodily fluids, with bites being the primary transmission vector. Symptoms develop rapidly, with full transformation occurring within 30 minutes of infection. The screen showed footage of military blockades on major highways, helicopters evacuating people from rooftops, naval vessels in Boston Harbor. Official sources report the contagion has reached at least 12 major cities across the United States. International reports confirm similar outbreaks in London, Beijing, and Moscow, suggesting a coordinated release rather than a natural pathogen. The World Health Organization has declared a global health emergency of unprecedented scale. Sarah sat heavily in a chair. Coordinated release? This was intentional? I thought back to the Harrington Institute, the military presence, the power fluctuations. It made a horrible kind of sense. Someone was experimenting with something they couldn't control, I said. And it got out? After ensuring the building was secure, I turned my attention to the control systems. The plant was operating on minimal emergency power, but its main generators were intact. With the grid failing around us, I could isolate this facility to run independently. I can get the backup generators online, I explained to Sarah. It won't be full power, but enough for essential systems. The fuel reserves should last about 2 weeks if we're careful. I began the startup sequence, my training taking over as I checked systems and initiated the protocols. The diesel generators rumbled to life, and gradually the facility's lights came on, the climate control systems activated, the security monitors flickered to life. You did it, Sarah said, relief evident in her voice. For now, I cautioned. But we need to be smart about power usage, and we need to secure the perimeter. The security monitors showed the exterior of the plant. The chain-link fence remained intact, but there were infected outside, perhaps a dozen, wandering the street. They hadn't noticed our presence yet, but that could change, especially as night fell. We spent the next few hours reinforcing entry points, checking supplies, and establishing a base in the control room, which offered good visibility and access to communication systems. The plant had an emergency supply cage, food, water, first aid equipment, enough for several days. As evening approached, I tried the radio systems, scanning for official broadcasts or other survivors. Most frequencies were static, but occasionally we caught fragments of military communications or emergency broadcasts. The picture they painted was bleak. The infection was spreading faster than containment efforts could manage. Major infrastructure was failing across the country. We should try to contact other survivors, Sarah suggested. There must be others out there like us, holding out in secure locations. I nodded, adjusting the radio to broadcast on emergency frequencies. This is Northeast Power Grid engineer Emerson Voss, broadcasting from the East Side Electrical Plant. We are secure with supplies and power. Any survivors in the area, please respond. We repeated the message hourly, but received no replies that first evening. As night fell, we took turns watching the security monitors and resting. The infected outside grew in number as darkness descended, seemingly attracted to the facility despite our efforts to minimize visible lights. They know we're here, Sarah observed, watching the monitors. They're gathering. By midnight, there were at least 30 infected surrounding the perimeter fence. They'd prowl the boundary, occasionally testing the gates, their movements becoming more coordinated. Through the security cameras, I could see they were different from the first infected we'd encountered. More focused. More patient. They're evolving, I said. The virus is changing them, making them smarter, more strategic. If they keep gathering like this, they could eventually breach the fence, Sarah warned. We need a way to disperse them or keep them back. I thought about our resources, about my knowledge of electrical systems. I might be able to electrify sections of the fence, I suggested. Not enough to kill, but enough to discourage them from touching it. I spent the next few hours modifying the perimeter security system, diverting power to create an electrical deterrent. By dawn, I had it operational, a low-level current running through the fence that would deliver a painful but non-lethal shock to anything that touched it. When morning came, we could see the effect. The infected outside would approach the fence, receive a shock, and retreat, growling in frustration. They remained nearby, watching the facility with unnerving focus, but no longer tried to breach the perimeter. "It's working," Sarah said, relief evident in her voice. "But they're still not leaving. They're patient now," I observed, waiting for an opportunity. We settled into a cautious routine over the next several hours, monitoring the perimeter, conserving supplies, broadcasting for other survivors, checking news updates when available. The television reports became increasingly sporadic as more stations went off air. The military communications we picked up were tourist-coded, but suggested massive casualties and failing containment efforts. Around noon, our radio finally picked up a response to our broadcasts. "Hello? Is anyone there? This is Professor Alan Chen from MIT. I'm with a group of students in the university's engineering building. We have supplies but limited security. Is your location secure? Over." I responded immediately, "This is Emerson Voss. We're secure in the East Side electrical plant with independent power. How many people are with you? What's your situation? Over. 6 of us total. We've barricaded the 3rd floor of Building 7. Power is failing, and we've had infected surrounding the building. We need extraction if possible. Over." I looked at Sarah. MIT was about 3 miles from our position, across dangerous territory. A rescue mission would be extremely risky. But 6 more survivors, especially from engineering backgrounds, could significantly improve our chances of long-term survival. "We need to think about this," I told her, switching off the radio temporarily. Getting to them would mean leaving our secure position, traveling through infected territory, and then bringing them back. It's dangerous. "But they won't last long without help," Sarah argued. "And more people means more skills, more hands to work and keep watch." She was right. In this new world, other people were the most valuable resource. Knowledge, skills, different perspectives, all essential for survival. "Let me check something first," I said, moving to the plant's blueprint cabinet. I pulled out maps of the city's utility infrastructure, focusing on the area between us and MIT. There I pointed, finding what I'd hoped for. There's a maintenance tunnel that runs within 2 blocks of the MIT campus. We could use that for most of the journey, avoiding the streets. I returned to the radio. "Professor Chen, we might be able to reach you, but we need time to plan. Keep your people safe. We'll contact you again in 3 hours with a plan. Conserve your radio battery. Over." "Understood. We'll be waiting. And thank you." Over. Sarah and I spent the next hour developing a rescue plan. The maintenance tunnels would get us close, but we'd still need to cross open ground to reach the engineering building. And once there, we'd need to safely extract 6 people and return to the plant. "I'll go alone," I decided. "You stay here, maintain the systems." "That's not happening," Sarah said firmly. "You need someone to watch your back, and I've seen what's out there too. I know we're facing." Her determination won me over. We gathered supplies, flashlights, radios, food, water, and makeshift weapons. A breaker bar from the maintenance room for me, a fire axe for Sarah. Not ideal, but better than nothing. Before leaving, I adjusted the plant systems to run automatically for up to 48 hours. If something happened to us, at least the facility would continue functioning for a while. We left through the maintenance tunnel access, securing it behind us. The tunnels were quiet, but we moved cautiously, remembering our earlier encounter with infected below ground. Our route would take us west, toward the university, following the main electrical conduits. After about an hour of careful progress, we heard something that made us pause, voices ahead. Human voices, not the growls of infected. We approached cautiously, weapons ready. Around a bend in the tunnel, we found 3 people, 2 men and a woman, huddled near a junction, a camping lantern providing light. They looked up in alarm as we appeared, brandishing improvised weapons of their own. "We're not infected," I said quickly, holding up empty hands. "We're from the electrical plant to the east. We heard you talking." They lowered their weapons slightly but remained wary. "How do we know you're not sick?" asked one man, a tall, bearded fellow in what had once been a business suit. "We've been secure for over 24 hours, Sarah replied. "No bites, no exposure. If we were infected, we'd have turned by now." The woman, middle-aged with short gray hair, stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Diana Foster. This is Marcus and Terrell. We've been moving through the tunnels since yesterday, trying to avoid the streets. On Emerson, I introduced myself. This is Sarah. We're actually headed to MIT to extract some survivors. There's a secure facility at the electrical plant with power supplies. The three exchanged looks. We've been trying to reach the evacuation point at the Air Force Base, Marcus explained. But the streets are overrun, and we keep hearing explosions. Military's bombing sections of the city. The evacuation points are likely overwhelmed, I told them. And the military is establishing quarantine zones. You might not be able to get through. Dr. Foster sighed. We figured as much. Your plant sounds like a better option if you're willing to take us in. I looked at Sarah, who nodded slightly. We could use more people, she said quietly, especially for the MIT extraction. All right, I decided. You can come with us to MIT, then back to the plant. But we need to move quickly. We told them we'd make contact again within 3 hours. Our group, now 5 strong, we continued west through the tunnels. Dr. Foster turned out to be a virologist from Boston University, who had been studying early cases when the outbreak exploded. Her insights were valuable. It's like nothing I've ever seen, she explained as we walked. The virus targets the frontal lobe and limbic system initially, shutting down higher reasoning and amplifying aggression in basic drives. But it doesn't stop there. It seems to be creating new neural pathways, almost like a secondary nervous system. That explains why they're becoming more organized, I said. More strategic. Exactly, Dr. Foster confirmed. They're not mindless, they're changing, adapting, and they remember. Places where they found prey before, they return to. People who escape them, they hunt specifically. So they could be hunting us right now, Marcus said nervously. Remembering us from before. It's possible, Dr. Foster admitted. But they seem more focused on current stimuli, light, sound, movement. If we stay quiet and out of sight, we can avoid detection. We reached the access point nearest at MIT around 3 in the afternoon. According to our maps, we were just 2 blocks from Building 7. But those blocks were through open streets, likely with infected present. We need to observe before moving, I suggested. Get the lay of the land. We carefully opened the access hatch, and I climbed up just enough to survey our surroundings. The street was chaotic, abandoned vehicles, debris, evidence of fighting. Several infected wandered nearby, but not in large numbers. In the distance, I could see the MIT campus, including the engineering building. 6 infected that I can see, I reported, dropping back down. Scattered, not grouped together. The building is about 400 yards from here. We'll need to move quickly and quietly. We formulated a plan. Moving as a group would attract too much attention. Instead, we would proceed in pairs, using the vehicles and debris as cover, leapfrogging from one position to the next, while others provided lookout. If we had separated, I instructed, continue to the engineering building. Building 7, 3rd floor. If you can't reach it, return to this access point and go back to the electrical plant. The tunnels will lead you there. We synchronized watches and prepared to move. The next part would be the most dangerous of our journey so far, exposed, vulnerable, with limited options if things went wrong. But 6 lives depended on us reaching that building. And in this new world, every life saved mattered more than ever. I looked at each person in our group, Sarah, Dr. Foster, Marcus, Terrell, and saw the same determination in their eyes. We were strangers 24 hours ago. Now we were a team, united by the simple, powerful desire to survive. Ready? I asked. They nodded grimly. Then let's move. Stay low, stay quiet, and stay alive. I went first with Sarah, sprinting from the access hatch to an overturned delivery truck about 50 yards away. We crouched behind it, scanning for infected. 2 were wandering near a bus stop to our left, but they hadn't noticed us yet. I signaled back to the tunnel entrance, and Dr. Foster emerged with Marcus, making their way to our position while Terrell kept watch below. The campus loomed ahead, its brick buildings eerily quiet. Building 7 was distinctive with its modern glass facade, now partially shattered on the lower floors. I could see makeshift barricades in some windows. The survivors had fortified their position as best they could. Next point, Sarah whispered, indicating a newspaper kiosk about 40 yards ahead. I nodded, and we moved quickly, staying low. The infected by the bus stop turned at our movement, their jerky motions becoming more focused as they spotted us. They began moving in our direction, not running but with purposeful strides. We reached the kiosk just as Dr. Foster and Marcus arrived at the delivery truck. Tyrell emerged from the tunnel and joined them. Our progress was good, but the infected were definitely aware of us now. And worse, their movements had attracted others. From side streets and buildings, more appeared, drawn by the activity. "We need to move faster," I told Sarah. "They're gathering." The pattern continued, leapfrogging from cover to cover, watching as our companions did the same. But with each movement, more infected appeared. By the time we were halfway to Building 7, I counted at least 15 tracking us. "This isn't working," Sarah said as we crouched behind a city maintenance vehicle. "There are too many. They'll surround the building before we all get inside." She was right. We needed a diversion. My eyes fell on the maintenance vehicle we were using as cover. It was a small utility truck used for traffic signal repair, and it had equipment I was familiar with. "I have an idea," I told her. "This truck has an emergency light bar. If I can get it working, we can set it off at the far end of the street. The light and noise might draw them away long enough for everyone to reach the building." I climbed into the truck cab, finding the keys still in the ignition. The battery was weak, but had enough power to operate the emergency lights. I set the controls to maximum brightness and sound, then climbed back out. "I'm going to move the truck," I explained to Sarah. "Once it's in position, I'll activate the lights and get back to you." When the infected moved toward it, everyone makes a run for Building 7. "That's too dangerous," she objected. "Let me do it." "I know these vehicles," I insisted, "and I can use the maintenance ladders on the side to get to the rooftops if necessary. I'll be okay." I explained the plan to the others, who had now joined us behind the truck. They agreed it was our best option. I would drive the vehicle to the far end of the street, set off the lights, then use a fire escape or maintenance ladder to get to a rooftop and make my way back via an elevated route. "Give me 5 minutes," I told them. "When you hear the siren, wait until the infected move away, then run straight for the building. Don't wait for me, I'll meet you there." With a final nod to Sarah, I climbed into the truck. The engine turned over weakly but started. I put it in gear and drove slowly toward the end of the street, trying not to attract attention too soon. In the rearview mirror, I could see the infected beginning to follow, attracted by the engine noise. At the intersection about 200 yards from my group, I stopped the truck, angling it for maximum visibility. The infected were closing in, perhaps 20 of them now, moving with that unsettling purpose. I set the emergency lights to activate on a 30-second delay, giving me time to exit and find my escape route. I spotted a fire escape on a building across the street. That would be my exit. I triggered the lights, then slipped out of the truck and ran for the fire escape. Behind me, the truck's light bar began flashing brilliantly, its siren wailing. The effect on the infected was immediate. They converged on the truck from all directions, drawn by the sensory overload. I reached the fire escape and climbed quickly, the metal ladders swaying under my weight. From the rooftop, I could see our plan working. The infected were clustering around the truck, clawing at it, trying to find the source of the stimulation. My group was already running toward Building 7, taking advantage of the cleared path. I moved across the rooftop, looking for a way to cross to the next building. There was a gap of about 6 feet to the adjacent structure, a jump I could make, but not without a risk. I backed up, took a running start, and leaped across, landing hard but safely on the neighboring roof. From this vantage point, I could see my group had reached Building 7. They were at the main entrance, communicating with someone inside through a partially broken window. After a moment, a barricade was moved and they were admitted. They'd made it safely. Now I needed to reach them. I continued across the rooftops, moving parallel to the street. The truck's siren was still wailing, but some of the infected were losing interest, beginning to wander away. I needed to hurry. 3 buildings from my destination, I encountered a problem. The next roof was too far to jump, at least 15 feet, with a substantial drop to an alley below. I searched for alternatives and spotted a power line running from this building to a pole near Building 7. It wasn't designed for weight, but as a lineman, I traversed worse in emergency situations. I removed my belt and folded it over the cable to create a makeshift zip line. It was risky, but with the street below filling again with infected, I had few options. I gripped the belt tightly, took a deep breath, and pushed off from the roof edge. The slide down the cable was faster than I'd anticipated. The friction heated the leather belt rapidly, and halfway across it began to tear. I was moving too quickly to stop, the ground rushing up as the cable sagged under my weight. The belt snapped about 20 feet from my destination. I fell, twisting to try to land safely, and crashed onto the hood of a parked car. The impact knocked the wind from my lungs, but nothing felt broken. I rolled off the vehicle, gasping for breath, and found myself at street level again, about 30 yards from Building 7. And I wasn't alone. 3 infected had noticed my fall and were already moving toward me, with more turning at the commotion. I had no choice but to run directly for the building, hoping the group would see me coming and open the barricade. I sprinted toward the entrance, the infected closing from behind. 20 yards, 10 yards, I could see faces at the windows now, someone shouting and pointing. The makeshift barricade at the entrance began to move. 5 yards, the door opened just enough for a person to squeeze through. I reached it as hands grabbed at my jacket from behind. I threw myself forward, tumbling through the opening as the barricade slammed shut behind me, cutting off the grasping hands of the infected. I lay on the floor, breathing hard, as multiple hands helped me up. Sarah was there, concern etched on her face. "You made it," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Told you I would," I managed between breaths. We were in the main lobby of Building 7, which had been transformed into a defensive position. Furniture formed barricades across all entrances. Windows were covered with boards or furniture. About a dozen people moved around the space, some I recognized from our tunnel group, others new faces. A tall, thin man with glasses approached. "Professor Chen, I presume," I said, extending my hand. He nodded, shaking my hand firmly. "And you must be the power grid engineer. Your timing is impeccable. We've been running on emergency batteries, and they're almost depleted." I looked around the space. "How many people do you have?" 11 now with your group," he replied. 6 of my students, plus the 5 of you." The lobby had been transformed into a living space with sleeping areas, a cooking station using camping equipment, and a central area with maps and plans spread out on tables. They've been organized and methodical in their approach to survival. "We need to talk about extraction," I said. "I've established a secure facility at the east side electrical plant. Independent power, supplies, defensible position. But getting everyone there won't be easy." Professor Chen nodded. "We've been monitoring the infected. Their behavior is changing, becoming more coordinated, and they congregate in larger groups at night." "We noticed the same," I confirmed. "Which means we should move while it's still daylight. How soon can your people be ready?" 20 minutes, he said decisively. "We've drilled for evacuation. Everyone knows what to grab." While the MIT group prepared, I conferred with Sarah and our tunnel companions. The maintenance access point we'd used was still our best option for returning to the plant, but moving 11 people through open streets to reach it would be challenging. The truck diversion worked once. Dr. Foster suggested, "Could we do something similar?" I considered our options. There's a campus police station 2 buildings over. They might have vehicles we could use, not just for distraction, but for transport. If we could secure a vehicle, we could drive directly to the maintenance access point rather than moving on foot. Professor Chen overheard and joined our discussion. The police station should be accessible via the underground passage network. Many campus buildings are connected below ground. This was a stroke of luck. If we could move through the campus tunnels rather than the streets, we'd avoid most of the infected until we reached the police station. "Show me these passages," I requested, and Chen led me to a building schematic mounted on a wall. "We're here, indicated on the map. The police station is here. These red lines show the maintenance tunnels connecting them. The passage is narrow but serviceable. I studied the route. This could work. We get to the police station, secure a vehicle if possible, then drive to the maintenance access point. From there, it's a straight shot through the city tunnels back to the plant." We assembled the full group for a briefing. Besides Professor Chen and his 6 students, we now had Sarah, Dr. Foster, Marcus Terrell, and myself. 11 survivors with a range of skills: medical, engineering, electrical, biology. If we could reach the plant safely, we'd have a solid foundation for long-term survival. I outlined the plan, making sure everyone understood their role. We would move in a tight formation through the campus tunnels, with Chen leading since he knew the route. I would take point once we reached the police station. If we found vehicles, we'd take 2 if possible for redundancy. "What if the police station is overrun?" asked one of the students, a young woman named Teresa. "Then we continue on foot to the maintenance access," I replied. "It's not ideal, but it's manageable. The important thing is to stay together and move quickly." We gathered our supplies, distributing the weight among everyone capable of carrying. The students had accumulated an impressive array of useful items: tools, medical supplies, technical equipment, even a small ham radio. All of it could prove valuable at the plant. Professor Chen led us to a service door in the building's basement. It opened to reveal a narrow utility tunnel, dimly lit by emergency lighting. "These passages were built during the Cold War," he explained. "Originally intended as emergency evacuation routes. They're not on public maps." We moved into the tunnel in single file, Chen leading, me at the rear to ensure no one fell behind. The passage was dry and relatively clean, clearly maintained regularly before the outbreak. Emergency lights provided just enough illumination to navigate. After about 10 minutes of cautious progress, Chen held up a hand, stopping our procession. "Listen," he whispered. From somewhere ahead came the unmistakable sounds of movement, the shuffling gait of infected. They had found their way into the tunnel network. "How is that possible?" Sarah asked quietly. "How would they know to come down here?" "They're learning," Dr. Foster replied grimly. "Exploring, finding new hunting grounds. And remember what I said about them remembering. If anyone fled using these tunnels early in the outbreak, the infected might have followed." We had limited options. Going back meant returning to Building 7, which was now surrounded by infected. Going forward meant potentially confronting infected in a narrow tunnel with limited maneuverability. "Is there a bypass?" I asked Chen. "Another route to the police station." He consulted a small map he carried. "There's a maintenance junction about 50 yards ahead. It branches to mechanical rooms in several buildings. We could divert to the science building, then reconnect to the main passage, closer to the police station." "That's our best option," I decided. "Move carefully. If we encounter infected, do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Our priority is reaching the police station intact." We proceeded with heightened caution, every sense alert for danger. The sounds of infected grew louder as we approached the junction Chen had mentioned. At the intersection we paused, peering down the main passage. 3 infected were visible, wandering aimlessly about 100 yards ahead. "This way," Chen whispered, indicating the side passage. We filed into it quickly, the narrower tunnel forcing us into single file again. The emergency lighting was sparser here, creating pools of shadow between faint light sources. We had gone perhaps 100 yards when Teresa, near the middle of our group, stumbled over debris in a darkened section. She caught herself against the wall, but her pack shifted, a metal water bottle clanging against the concrete. The sound echoed through the tunnel. We froze, listening intently. For several seconds, silence. Then, from behind us, the unmistakable response, growls and rapidly approaching footsteps. The infected had heard and were coming. "Run," I'd ordered, abandoning stealth for speed. "Stay together." We moved as quickly as possible through the narrow passage, Chen leading us through turns and junctions with practiced ease despite the emergency. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. The infected were moving faster than us, uninhibited by the darkness or concern for safety. Chen brought us to a service ladder. "Up," he commanded. "This leads to the science building basement. We can cross through it to reach the police station." We climbed rapidly, emerging into a laboratory storage area. Chen secured the access hatch behind us, but it wouldn't hold for long if the infected found it. "This way," he directed, leading us through a maze of storage rooms and laboratories. The science building was silent, apparently evacuated early in the outbreak. We moved through it quickly, reaching a fire exit that Chen said would put us directly across from the police station. Before opening the door, I peered through its small window to assess the situation outside. The quad between buildings was relatively clear, with only a few infected visible at the far end. The police station was about 50 yards away, its windows intact, entrance secured with a security gate. "We'll cross in groups of 3, I instructed. "Quick, but not running. Running attracts too much attention. Chen, you have keys to the police station?" He nodded, producing a master key card. "It should work on all campus facilities." "Good. First group is Chen, Sarah, and Dr. Foster. Go directly to the station entrance, no detours. Next group follows 30 seconds later." The first group moved out smoothly, crossing the open space with purposeful strides. They reached the police station without incident, Chen's key card granting them access through the security gate. The second group, 3 students, followed as planned, also reaching safety. The third group had just started across when something changed. An infected wandering near a building entrance suddenly straightened, its attention focusing on our moving companions. It let out a piercing shriek that carried across the quad, a hunting call. From multiple directions, other infected responded, converging rapidly. "Change of plan," I told the remaining 2 students and Marcus, who had yet to cross. "We run, now, all together." We burst from the science building, sprinting across the quad as infected poured from side streets and buildings, converging on our position. The third group had almost reached the police station, the security gate still open from their passage. We were 20 yards from safety when Marcus stumbled, going down hard on the concrete. I turned back as the others continued, reaching him as he struggled to his feet. His ankle was twisted, possibly broken. "Lean on me," I urged, supporting his weight as we hobbled toward the gate. The infected were closing fast, now just yards behind us. We reached the gate as the others were trying to close it. "Wait," I shouted, practically dragging Marcus the final few steps. We tumbled through the opening, and the gate slammed shut behind us, security locks engaging just as the first infected reached it. They'd pounded against the barrier, their collective strength causing the metal to flex alarmingly. But it held, at least for now. Inside, the police station was secure, but eerily empty. Evidence of hasty evacuation was everywhere. Half-empty coffee cups, abandoned equipment, a bulletin board with duty rosters for shifts that would never be filled. Check for vehicles, I directed as two students helped Marcus to a chair, and medical supplies for his ankle. I moved to the dispatch area, finding communication equipment still operational on emergency power. The radio systems were more powerful than anything we'd had access to so far. I quickly scanned frequencies, searching for official broadcasts or other survivor groups. Most channels were static, but on a military frequency, I caught fragments of communication. Perimeter established and containment protocols in effect, and evacuation complete, commencing Operation Firebreak Phase 2. Whatever Phase 2 entailed, it didn't sound good for anyone still in the city. One of Chen's students, a young man named James, approached with good news. There are 2 vehicles in the secure garage, a patrol SUV and a transport van. Both have fuel. This was exactly what we needed. The van could hold all 11 of us and our supplies. The SUV provided backup if something went wrong. "Let's move quickly," I told the group. The military is implementing something called Operation Firebreak Phase 2. I don't know what that means, but it sounds like we don't want to be here when it happens. We gathered our supplies and moved to the garage where the vehicles waited. The patrol SUV was a standard police interceptor, while the van was designed for transporting multiple people during campus emergencies. Both had full fuel tanks, a stroke of luck in our favor. As we loaded our supplies into the vehicles, I caught Sarah looking at me with an unreadable expression. "What?" I asked. "You went back for Marcus," she said simply. "You could have kept running. I hadn't even thought about it. We stick together. That's how we survive." She nodded, a small smile breaking through her exhaustion. "That's why we're going to make it." I hoped she was right. We had the vehicles, we had a destination, we had a plan. But the city was falling deeper into chaos with each passing hour, and the infected were growing more organized, more strategic. Our journey was far from over. As we prepared to leave the relative safety of the police station for the uncertain streets beyond, I couldn't help but wonder what would be waiting for us at the maintenance access point, and more importantly, what we might find when we eventually returned to the electrical plant. Had our sanctuary remained secure in our absence, or would we find yet another safe haven lost to the ever-adapting threat that was consuming the city hour by hour? One thing was certain: the next few hours would determine whether our growing group of survivors had a future in this new world, and I was determined to ensure that they did, whatever it took. I took the driver's seat of the van while James, who had campus security training, took the SUV. We loaded our injured and most vulnerable people in the van. Marcus with his injured ankle, Dr. Foster, and 3 of the students. Sarah insisted on riding with me, while Professor Chen went with James to navigate, along with the remaining students. Before departing, I gathered everyone for a final briefing. The maintenance access point is approximately 8 blocks from here. Under normal circumstances, that would be a 5-minute drive. These aren't normal circumstances. Streets are blocked with abandoned vehicles, and the infected are everywhere. We stay together, I continued. The SUV leads, creating a path if necessary. The van follows closely. If we get separated, continue to the access point. It's on the corner of Hampshire and Portland Streets, near the old factory building with the red brick. Everyone clear? 11 faces looked back at me, a mix of fear and determination. I checked my watch. Just past 4 in the afternoon. We had perhaps 3 hours of daylight left. Not much time. "Let's move," I said. James raised the garage door, and the SUV rolled out into the street. I followed in the van, wincing at the immediate chorus of shrieks from infected who noticed our emergence. They began converging immediately, but we had acceleration on our side. The vehicles picked up speed, leaving the immediate threats behind. The first few blocks were manageable. James navigated through gaps between abandoned cars, occasionally nudging smaller vehicles aside with the reinforced bumper of the police SUV. I followed his exact path, keeping close to avoid being cut off. But as we approached Massachusetts Avenue, the situation deteriorated. The major thoroughfare was completely gridlocked with abandoned vehicles. People had tried to flee en masse, creating an impenetrable tangle of cars, trucks, and buses, and among them wandered hundreds of infected. James stopped the SUV, and I pulled alongside. Through the windows, we quickly conferred. "We need an alternate route," Chen said, consulting a campus map. "We can try Vassar Street. It runs parallel and might be less congested." I nodded. "Lead the way. But be careful. The detour takes us closer to downtown." James turned the SUV around, heading for the alternate route. As we moved, I noticed something disturbing. The infected weren't just randomly wandering anymore. They were actively tracking us, flowing like water around obstacles, taking shortcuts to intercept our projected path. "They're hurting us," Sarah observed from the passenger seat. "Working together to direct our movement." She was right. The infected were behaving with unsettling coordination, almost like a single organism with many bodies. This was far beyond the basic pack behavior we'd observed earlier. We turned onto Vassar Street, finding it marginally better than Massachusetts Avenue. There were still abandoned vehicles, but with gaps we could navigate. James increased speed, slaloming between obstacles. I followed, keenly aware of infected streaming from side streets behind us, a growing wave of pursuit. We made good progress for several blocks until rounding a corner to find the street ahead completely blocked. A tractor-trailer had jackknifed across the entire roadway, and the buildings on either side left no room to bypass. James stopped, backing up slightly to give us room to maneuver. I pulled alongside again for a quick conference. "We're 4 blocks from the access point," Chen said, pointing at his map. "But we need to find another route around this blockage." I studied the map, noting a narrow alley that cut through to Portland Street. "There," I indicated. "That alley should get us back on track. It's narrow, but should be wide enough for the vehicles." James nodded. "I'll go first. If it's passable, I'll signal." He maneuvered the SUV toward the alley entrance, its tires scraping against the tight walls as he edged forward. The vehicle disappeared from view around a bend in the passage. We waited tensely. Behind us, the first of the pursuing infected appeared at the far end of the street. They spotted us immediately, their pace quickening. "Come on, James," I muttered, watching the alley entrance for any sign of the SUV's return. After what felt like an eternity, it was probably only a minute, James reappeared at the alley entrance, waving frantically. His message was clear. The alley was a dead end or impassable for vehicles. We had a serious problem. The infected were now flowing into the street behind us, dozens of them, with more arriving constantly. Going back was not an option. Going forward through the alley was impossible to the vehicles. We were trapped. "We need to continue on foot," I decided quickly. "Grab essential supplies only." We moved together through the alley to Portland Street, then to the access point. Everyone moved rapidly, collecting critical supplies: water, first aid equipment, tools, weapons. Marcus would need help walking, so 2 of the stronger students positioned themselves to support him. As the infected closed in, we formed a tight group at the alley entrance. I took point, Sarah and Dr. Foster in the middle with Marcus, and the more vulnerable students, James and Chen, taking the rear guard position with makeshift weapons, a police baton, and a fire extinguisher. "Stay tight, move quickly, no stragglers," I instructed. "Ready? Go." We entered the alley at a fast walk, the walls so close they brushed our shoulders. The passage twisted between buildings, occasionally opening into small courtyards before narrowing again. The SUV had made it about halfway before being stopped by a collapsed fire escape that blocked the path for vehicles but left just enough room for people to squeeze past. We navigated around the obstacle, continuing deeper into the urban maze. Behind us, frustrated shrieks echoed as the infected tried to follow, their numbers working against them in the confined space. The narrow passage was actually helping us, creating a bottleneck they couldn't easily overcome. After several minutes of tense progress, the alley widened, opening onto Portland Street. I checked in both directions. Infected were visible, but scattered, not in the concentrated numbers we'd left behind. The maintenance access point was visible about 2 blocks north. "There," I pointed. "See that utility cover near the corner? That's our entry point. We move together, steady pace, don't run unless I say so." We emerged from the alley and headed north, maintaining a tight formation. Marcus was struggling despite the support, each step on his injured ankle clearly agonizing. But he didn't complain, his face set with determination. The scattered infected noticed us immediately, converging from multiple directions but still too far away to intercept us before we reached the access point. We were going to make it. Then a new sound reached us, a deep rhythmic thrumming that seemed to vibrate through the concrete beneath our feet. Military helicopters appeared over the skyline, moving in formation toward downtown. They were massive gunships, the kind used for heavy urban operations. Operation Firebreak, Dr. Foster said grimly. Phase 2. As if confirming her assessment, a series of explosions erupted in the downtown area. Not the surgical strikes we'd witnessed earlier, but massive detonations that sent shockwaves rolling through the streets. Buildings collapsed in the distance, smoke and dust billowing upward. They're leveling entire blocks, Chen observed, his voice hollow with shock. Creating a firebreak around the most infected areas. Move faster, Pike urged the group. We need to get underground now. We increased our pace, practically jogging the final block to the maintenance access. I reached it first, quickly locating the recessed handle and pulling with all my strength. The heavy cover scraped aside, revealing the ladder descending into darkness. Down quickly, I directed. Professor Chen, you know the tunnel route to the plant. He nodded. East 2 miles, then north at the main junction. I memorized it from your map. Good. You leave once we're below. I'll bring up the rear. One by one, our group ascended into the maintenance tunnel. Sarah helped Marcus navigate the ladder, the young man biting his lip to avoid crying out as his injured ankle bumped against the rungs. The infected were closing in now, the fastest less than a block away. James and I prepared to be the last down, weapons ready to hold off the approaching threats. Go, I told him as the last student disappeared below. I'm right behind you. James descended quickly. I took one final look at the street. The infected were now just yards away, running at full speed. I grabbed the access cover and slid feet first into the opening, pulling the heavy metal cover over me as I descended. It slammed shut just as the first infected reached our position. The tunnel was dimly lit by emergency lighting, the concrete passage stretching into darkness. Our group was gathered below, waiting for direction. I did a quick head count, all 11 accounted for. Let's move, I said. Chen, lead the way. We set off through the tunnels, moving as quickly as Marcus's injury would allow. Above us, muffled through concrete and earth, explosions continued to rock the city. Operation Firebreak was in full effect, the military sacrificing infrastructure to contain the infection. The maintenance tunnels remained our sanctuary, free of infected and protected from the destruction above. We moved steadily eastward, following junction markers and utility signs. After about 40 minutes, we reached the main junction where our path turned north toward the electrical plant. As we made the turn, Chen, who was leading, suddenly stopped, raising a hand in warning. The tunnel ahead was not empty. Shadows moved in the dim emergency lighting, the distinctive, jerky movements of infected. Back, I whispered urgently. Back to the junction. We retreated quickly, gathering in the larger space of the main junction to consider our options. How did they get in? Sarah asked. These tunnels were clear when we left. They're exploring systematically, Dr. Foster explained. Learning the city's infrastructure, finding new hunting grounds. They probably found an access point somewhere near the plant and started searching outward. This was deeply concerning. If the infected had found the maintenance tunnels, our safe passage to the plant was compromised. And worse, if they discovered the plant itself, our sanctuary might already be overrun. We need another route, I said, studying the junction markers. 6 different passages branched from our position, each leading to different parts of the city's infrastructure. The water main tunnel runs parallel to our route and connects to the plant's basement level. It's narrower, partially flooded in sections, but passable. Lead the way, Chen said. You know these systems best. I took point, leading the group into a smaller passage branching northeast. The tunnel gradually narrowed and descended, the concrete walls giving way to older brick construction. This was part of the original water management system, built decades before the electrical infrastructure. The passage grew damper, water seeping through cracks, pooling on the uneven floor. In some sections it was ankle-deep, slowing our progress as we carefully navigated the slippery terrain. How much farther? Sarah asked after we'd been sloshing through the water for nearly 20 minutes. Less than half a mile, I assured her. The access to the plant's lower level should be just ahead. As if on cue, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber, a water distribution hub with multiple pipes and control valves. On the far wall, a heavy iron door, marked with the electrical plant's designation, was visible. That's it, I said with relief. That door leads directly to the plant's basement. We crossed the chamber, our spirits lifting at the prospect of safety. I reached the door and tried the handle, but it didn't budge. It was locked from the other side. My access key won't work here, I realized. This is an emergency exit, only meant to open from inside the plant. This was a serious setback. We were so close to safety, yet still locked out of our sanctuary. Can we break through? James asked, examining the door's hinges. I shook my head. It's reinforced steel, designed to prevent flooding from reaching electrical systems. We'd need heavy equipment. So what do we do? Teresa asked, fear edging into her voice. We can't go back through the tunnels with those things out there. I examined our surroundings, looking for options. The distribution hub had several outflow pipes, maintenance access points, and control systems. And that gave me an idea. The plant's water intake system, I said, inspiration striking. It draws from the same network we're in now. If I can identify the right control valves, I might be able to trigger an emergency inspection protocol. That would require someone inside the plant to check the intake system, including this distribution hub. It was a long shot, but it was our best option. I examined the control panel, finding the designation codes for different water routes. After a few minutes of studying the system, I located the valve sequence that controlled flow to the electrical plant. Stand back, I instructed the group. This might get wet. I adjusted several valves, intentionally creating an irregular flow pattern that would trigger automated alerts in the plant's monitoring system. Then I located the emergency communications system, a simple intercom designed for workers in different sections of the water network to communicate. I pressed the call button, hoping the system was still operational. A burst of static confirmed it was working. This is Northeast Power Grid engineer Emerson Voss, calling from the South Water Distribution Hub. If anyone is monitoring in the electrical plant, please respond. We waited in tense silence. After a full minute without response, I tried again. This is Emerson Voss at the South Water Hub. We are 11 survivors seeking emergency access to the plant. If anyone can hear this, please respond. More silence. I was about to try a third time when the intercom crackled to life. Voss, is that really you? A female voice, faint but clear. Yes, I confirmed quickly. Who am I speaking with? This is Linda. Linda Wilson. I'm part of a group that found the plant after evacuating the hospital. We've been here since yesterday. Linda, that was Pete's wife, the nurse he'd mentioned just before everything went to hell. An incredible stroke of luck. Linda, we need access through the water system emergency door, I explained. We're locked out and can't return through the maintenance tunnels. They're overrun with infected. Hold on, she replied. I'll get someone to open it. We've been monitoring the systems like you set up. Less than 5 minutes later, we heard mechanical sounds from the door, locks disengaging, hinges creaking. The heavy portal swung open to reveal 2 men with improvised weapons, looking wary but relieved. Thank God, one said, lowering a pipe wrench he'd been holding as a club. We thought we were the only ones left. We filed through the door into the plant's basement level, our new hosts quickly securing it behind us. They led us upstairs to the main control room, where we found an unexpected sight. The plant had become a survivor community. At least 20 people had taken refuge here, creating a miniature society in our absence. Linda rushed forward when she saw us, her medical training immediately evident as she assessed Marcus's injury and directed him to a makeshift treatment area. The control room had been transformed into a command center, with sleeping areas arranged in adjoining offices and a communal kitchen established in the break room. How did you find this place? I asked Linda as she worked on Marcus's ankle. After the hospital was overrun, a group of us escaped in an ambulance, she explained. We were trying to reach the evacuation center when the military started bombing. We needed shelter, and I remembered Pete mentioning you worked at the eastern plant. When we found it and saw you had power running, it seemed like divine intervention. More survivors had trickled in over the past 24 hours, people who'd seen the lights at night or heard our radio broadcasts. They'd established a security rotation, rationing system, and even begun planting a small garden on the flat roof using soil from a nearby landscaping supply yard. As our groups integrated, sharing information and resources, I found myself on the roof access, looking out over the changed city. Smoke rose from multiple locations where Operation Firebreak continued. The military was systematically isolating infected zones, sacrificing infrastructure to create containment areas. From our elevated position, I could see the pattern. They were essentially riding off downtown and the northern districts, concentrating on preserving the western suburbs and evacuation routes. Sarah joined me, following my gaze across the urban landscape. They're not coming to save us, are they? She asked quietly. No, I admitted. Not anytime soon. They're focusing on containment now, not rescue. We're on our own, she nodded, seeming to have expected this answer. So, what's the long-term plan? We can't stay here forever. Supplies will run out eventually. She was right. The plant was secure for now, but not indefinitely sustainable. Fuel for the generators would last perhaps 2 weeks. Food supplies, even with careful rationing, would run out in a month. We needed a longer-term strategy. I shared my thoughts as we watched the setting sun cast long shadows across the altered cityscape. The infected are evolving, becoming more organized. But they still have weaknesses. They're drawn to light, sound, movement. We can use that. You're thinking of more than just survival, Sarah observed. I'm thinking about rebuilding, I confirmed. This plant gives us power, the foundation of modern civilization. With power, we can establish communications, create secure zones, begin reclaiming territory block by block. It wasn't just optimism. Looking at our combined group, I saw the seeds of a new community. We had medical personnel, engineers, security experience, diverse skills, and knowledge. And most importantly, we had purpose, a reason to continue beyond mere survival. Over the next 24 hours, we developed a plan. Using the plant as our base, we would establish a network of secure outposts, connected by the maintenance tunnels. We would map infected concentrations, create diversions to draw them away from critical areas, and gradually expand our safe zone. Professor Chen and his students began modifying our radio equipment to reach other survivor groups. Dr. Foster worked with Linda to establish medical protocols and study infected behavior patterns. James and his security background helped organize defense strategies, and I focused on what I knew best, the power infrastructure. By the end of our second day at the plant, I had established a stable power grid covering a 6-block radius around our position. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, but it was a start. A foothold of civilization in a world rapidly descending into chaos. 48 hours after the outbreak began at Boston Memorial Hospital, we weren't just surviving anymore. We were planning for tomorrow, for next week, for next year. That evening, as I checked the perimeter security before nightfall, I watched the infected gathering outside our fence. They were more numerous now, more coordinated, testing different sections of the barrier with almost methodical precision. They were learning, adapting, but so were we. The electrical deterrent system I'd installed was working, delivering painful shocks that kept them from directly contacting the fence. But they were already developing countermeasures, pushing debris against the fence with long sticks, trying to short out sections of the barrier. This would be a long war of attrition, human ingenuity against viral evolution. But looking back at the plant, seeing lights glowing in the windows, hearing occasional laughter from within, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again: hope. We had survived the first 48 hours of the outbreak. We had established a sanctuary. We had begun to adapt to this new reality. And perhaps most importantly, we had found each other, strangers united by circumstance, now forging the bonds of a new community. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with setbacks and losses. The infected would continue to evolve, presenting new challenges. Resources would grow scarcer. Winter would come, bringing its own hardships. But as I made my final rounds that evening, checking systems that kept our lights burning in the darkness, I felt a quiet confidence. The world had changed irrevocably, but humanity would endure. We would rebuild, reconnect, reimagine what civilization could be. It had taken just 48 hours for society to collapse, but from its ruins, something new was already beginning to emerge. As a high-voltage lineman, I had spent my career maintaining the invisible systems that powered modern life. Now, in this altered world, that knowledge had become our most valuable resource, the foundation upon which we would build our future. The lights stayed on in our small corner of Boston that night, and as long as they did, the darkness could not claim complete victory.